So this is my F100 Wroncho inspired build complete. Obviously this is running the Proline F100 cab right here with a Endura cage. With the body, obviously the fenders are trimmed to fit these 2.2 wheels. So for the paint scheme, it's just Tamiya paints. The red is actually a metallic red backed with a bright red, just to bring a bit more warmth and sort of the orange color back into the metallic red, which on itself is a bit cool. And the white is just the Tamiya PS flat white. The body is obviously using just front body mounts here, but the back, I've actually bolted this stainless plate onto the rear bumper mount here, and that essentially makes the rear clipless. Basically the cage just slots in right there, and that comes off. So I call this a Wroncho inspired build because it technically isn't a Wraith and a Honcho. In fact, these are axles from a Bomber, and this is a TRX-4 chassis. But the idea is the same, running AR60 axles with 2.2 wheels and tires mounted up to a scale frame rail chassis. So this build retains the 2-speed from the TRX-4. It's actually using a JX shifter servo, and this is just a slight upgrade from the stock one. This just has metal gears. It's still waterproof. On the motor side, I'm running a 54-tooth spur with a 9-tooth pinion and a Holmes Hobby Crawlmaster Sport 550 15 turn. So this is equivalent to a 1250 kV motor, and it's super slow. And that is mainly because this particular transmission is obviously designed for portal axles, and those have a lot of gear down, so this transmission is actually kind of fast. And because these AR60 axles don't have any portals, if I just put a regular 21 turn or 27 turn in there, the truck is just way too fast and does not have enough torque, since there's not enough reduction in the gearbox. Powering that is the Whole-Wing 1080 ESC, obviously one of the best crawling ESCs, and just super reasonable price. And I'm running all of that off 3S LiPo here. I like these smaller 3S packs, so this is a 2200 mAh pack, and they're just nice, lightweight and inexpensive. Servo wise, this is a Power HD 40 kg waterproof servo. It runs up to 8.4 volts, and if you were looking at this servo, I'd highly recommend just running at 8.4 volts, because anything lower, the servo just feels very sluggish and slow. And with that said, I actually have a Castle BEC powering this particular servo right here, and it's powered through receiver bypass harness. So this particular BEC only powers the servo and nothing else, while the receiver and the shifter servo is actually powered by the BEC on the ESC at 6 volts. Other than that, there are a few upgrade parts here, obviously some extra speed shock towers here. I've added an aluminium plate here separately so I can lay down my shocks for more articulation and a softer ride. Front aluminium shock towers as well. And I actually have a GRC motor mount here. This just makes everything more solid, and also this acts as a bit of a heat sink. Also, shock wise, these are just the stock shocks off the axial Bomber. The front and rears are the same length, but the rears are really heavy. I've actually added 70 weight shock oil in here, and the fronts are running 45, I think, with an internal spring, so a spring off of just a ballpoint pen, just so it keeps the front end down. Obviously, I've got stainless sliders and also a sort of homemade battery tray here. And for the bumper, it's a Yeah Racing, just a generic bumper that I've trimmed the sides so it will clear the tires. And the main reason I went for this is just the stinger. I think it looks fitting. Onto the belly of the truck. Obviously, since this is a completely different mismatched chassis and axles, these are actually just homemade links I had to fashion in order to connect the chassis to the axles. The final wheelbase measures to around 14.5 inches. It's slightly longer than what typical Wroncho builds are, so it's a 13.5, that's usually the standard, but I've just made it a bit longer and it seems to work well so far. Links wise, these are obviously again homemade. I have 1/4 inch stainless lower links and 3/16 inch upper links. Drive shafts are just the stock drive shafts off the Bomber. It does need probably a new female part here, since this spline seems to be sticking out a bit too far, but it seems to work fine so far. Axle-wise, I do have a few upgrades. So these axles originally came from a kit version of the Axial Bomber, so it already has the stock universal joints in there. They're working just fine, so I've just left them in. But gear-wise, I'm actually running the Vanquish Incision underdrive gears, both front and rear, again to try and gear the truck down a bit more. And I'm also running the Vanquish Incision spool on the inside. I also have the Vanquish Stereo 1 kit, so the rear aluminium lockouts, C-hubs, and knuckles there. But other than that, this is basically the build. So this concludes the TRX-4 Wroncho build, and I've had actually a lot of fun putting this particular build together. Mainly it's because it's just something very different. You know, in a market now that's dominated mainly by 1.9 scale rigs, I just find it sort of interesting to get back into more 2.2 trucks. And especially this is sort of more old school modification, if you want to call it that. Again, this is by no means a performance king. In fact, it actually has quite a bit of torque twist, and you kind of have to learn how to drive this truck. And it drives a lot more different than you know, your 1.9 trail trucks, whether it's a portal truck or a straight axle truck. But anyways, that's basically it. There'll be a running video out pretty soon, and I look forward to driving this truck and just seeing how it performs.